It's my pleasure to be here to tell you about some exciting work that's going on at Iconic Therapeutics. Just a disclosure, I'm a paid consultant for Iconic Therapeutics. And Iconic Therapeutics is a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company that is looking at tissue factor in uveal melanoma based on tissue factor research that was done at Yale University. So what is tissue factor? Tissue factor is a protein that's normally around blood vessels. And when it's around blood vessels and blood vessels get injured, it causes clotting. That's where tissue factor normally lives. But tissue factor also lives on melanomas. Tissue factor lives on multiple other types of cancers. And that is why Yale thought, well, maybe this might be a good marker to look at for cancer treatments. Tissue factor is on the surface of tumor cells, tissue factor is on the vessels of tumor cells, and tissue factor is in the microenvironment of tumors. So that's why they thought, well, let's see if we target tissue factor, let's see what happens. What Yale did was they made a molecule called Icon1, and this is an immunoconjugate protein. So normally tissue factor, if something gets injured, what binds to it is factor 7, and that's just another protein, that's the name of the protein. And factor 7 causes the activation of stuff. So factor 7 and tissue factor just stick together like glue. And what Yale did was they bound factor 7, which binds to tissue factor, which is on cancer cells, and they bound it to the end of an antibody so that we could hopefully activate the immune system once the tissue factor is bound to the factor 7 and get your own body to attack the cancer cells. They've shown in laboratories that this looks like it might work. This is a graph of cancer cells in a solution, and then they add Icon to it, and then add your own body's peripheral blood cells, which are the ones that attack things. And the two graphs on the right side are what they look at to see whether or not the cancer cells were attacked. So what's showing up there are only constituents or things that are inside of cells. So what happened was that factor 7 bound to the tissue factor on the cancer cells, activated the natural killer cells, which lysed those cells, the cancer cells, and that's what the result is. The control is if you just took an antibody against something and tried to do the same test. So that's the control. So this is in vitro or in a test tube that shows that it looks like there's anti-tumor activity. They also looked in animals. And there's a special type of mouse that has a really poor immune system, so that if you inject the mouse with cancer cells, they'll start to grow on wherever you inject them. They did a study on these immune-compromised mice on the left-hand side and injected these animals with melanoma cells. And then they gave them something that produced Icon. And the little graph on the bottom shows the growth of tumor cells for the mice who got Icon. So the tumor didn't grow. And the graph that goes up shows what the mice would do if they didn't get Icon. The tumor got a lot bigger. And on the right-hand side, they also did it on the immune-compromised mice and prostate cancer. So this was the data that made Yale think, well, you know, this looks like it might work. And Icon licensed this information from Yale. And we currently have a phase 1 study going on in uveal melanoma. Uveal melanomas have been shown to have tissue factor, so we are targeting that. We're looking for patients who have newly diagnosed uveal melanoma and haven't been treated. But our hope is that this will possibly be a treatment. Again, with pharmaceuticals, 1 out of 14 doesn't make, only 1 out of 14 makes it. So somebody's got to try something. And so that is why I am helping Iconic, because I think this is a really important disease, and we would love to get something to help people with uveal melanoma. And that's it.
Fantastic. Thank you.